Let's talk about getting in the door. Ministering in a correctional setting requires learning how to serve in a controlled environment. Everything in the prison is controlled and dictated by policy, which is established by protocols and decisions of the warden. Often a new warden will require new policies, which will cause changes in process that you'll need to learn. So just go with the flow and simply do what you are asked to do. Property guidelines determine what inmates are permitted to have. For example, as of this writing, the Property Matrix in Virginia Department of Corrections prescribes what an inmate can have in their property. This includes the number of books they can have, shirts, pairs of socks, underwear, and pants that they can have on their possession at any moment. In most facilities, a record of the inmate's property is kept on file, and if that inmate is transferred or moved for disciplinary reasons, anything in their possession that's beyond what is prescribed is considered contraband and it will be confiscated. Likewise, as a volunteer or as a chaplain, your interactions with inmates are to be conducted within the parameters that are set out by policy, and you're expected to know the policy. You must not bring items into the prison with you. Anything that may be considered contraband can cause you to lose the privilege of serving in the facility. Now, upon arrival, you should consider carefully where you should store such things as your car keys, your cell phone, your wallet or purse, or any personal possessions. Many jails or prisons provide lockers to store such things while you're visiting. I remember my first time going into a prison. I was nervous and I left my keys inside my vehicle, keeping them safe, and locked the door. It took hours to get my car opened after I was done inside the prison. You'll be searched and you'll be scanned upon entering. You'll empty your pockets into a basket and you'll have a body scan to detect metal objects. You may be required to remove your belt and your shoes. Well, if you've ever been through airport screening these days, you'll have an idea of what to expect. Now, before you enter the prison, volunteers and chaplains must have an extensive background check. This may include submitting a fingerprint card, giving your social security number, providing references, and sharing any connections you may have to someone who's incarcerated in the Department of Corrections. Now, of course, the specific procedures will vary from one institution and state to another. Even if you're a chaplain and have already passed a background check, each jail or prison will likely require you to submit to their own process, which may include, probably will include, a thorough background check. Generally, a person cannot be a volunteer in a prison where there is someone with whom they have a close personal connection incarcerated there. These policies can vary from state to state, from facility to facility. So before submitting yourself to a background check, you should know the operational policy of your state and the specific facility you plan to serve in. Now, in some settings, the warden has discretion on all volunteers, so even if you have no red flags from the background check, the warden still decides who's authorized to come into the facility. It will be important to understand what might disqualify you as a volunteer when it comes to your background check, or if there is case-by-case consideration. But still, if the warden says no for any reason, even if the reason is not provided to you, well, then the reason is no. For instance, some facilities may not allow volunteers with past felonies even after their record has been fully expunged, but other facilities may be more lenient. Even if the applicant's criminal history has been without an infraction for a considerable amount of time, the warden may still deny entry. Although policy may have a set amount of time required, the unit head or warden can always exercise discretion if the person's past history is of a concern to them. Policy here can impact your heartfelt desire to serve in the prison. Some of our best volunteers and chaplains have a criminal history from long ago, but their lives have been dramatically changed, especially as they've grown in their own faith in Christ. Such people make wonderful examples for the inmates. In wonderful ministries like Kairos, you may be an awesome addition to the team, but know that in some facilities you'll be barred entry based on your past. It is what it is. In nearly every jail or prison, volunteers must receive training or orientation. It may include several hours in courses designed to educate volunteers on what's expected of them by that institution. If you're one of our chaplains, you've received excellent training in the art and craft of presencing, spiritual care, listening, and being a non-judgmental presence. But you'll still have to take additional instruction that's required by the institution where you intend to serve. So it's important that you understand safety guidelines and standards of conduct. One of the topics you may learn about is gang recognition. In case there is gang activity in your groups, you can notify security. Another area is PREA, P-R-E-A. It's the Prison Rape Elimination Act. This is a federal standard followed by all prisons. PREA, training in it, will educate you on how to identify and report cases of sexual abuse that you see inside a prison. PREA also charts out clear guidelines of what's expected of your own personal boundaries and interactions with inmates. What's important to remember in relation to PREA is that chaplains and volunteers are mandatory reporters. If we see anything of a sexual nature occurring between inmates or staff and inmate, we must report it to a staff member. Your clergy confidentiality as a chaplain does not cover such things. So if you see or suspect criminal activity, you must report it. Another dimension of PREA and policy of conduct within the prison is concerned with fraternizing with inmates. Fraternization is a technical term in the Department of Corrections, discouraging us from becoming overly familiar with inmates. This could be romantic or overly friendly to the point where you become involved in the personal affairs of the inmate. That's a no-no. The goal of the Department of Corrections is to be firm, fair, and consistent. Therefore, any special treatment of inmates can be deemed fraternization. This is why we must take care in our ministry to the inmates. Of course, we want to help and encourage. We want to listen to them and love them and share Christ with them. But ongoing personal contact might be frowned upon. Be sure to check with your team, your training resources, the staff chaplain, or other authorities at the prison to be sure of what is permitted and what is not. Chaplains and other religious volunteers are not to get involved in an inmate's legal process for any reason, or become advocates with the administration on behalf of individual inmates. The challenge is that inmates will often seek advocacy and help from volunteers and chaplains in their particular situation. In such cases, chaplains and volunteers must maintain professional boundaries with the inmates. I've personally had times where inmates have asked me to look up their personal financial information or call a lawyer on their behalf. Some have asked me to mail a letter for them. Don't do such things. As a chaplain or a volunteer, to assist an inmate in this manner would be considered fraternization and would compromise your ministry in the prison. These parameters do not mean that we can't have personable and healthy engagement with the inmate population. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that we do not allow ourselves to become overly involved in an individual inmate's situation. Things we may routinely do for people outside the prison may not be allowed on the inside, so take care here. Also, this means not allowing inmates to get personally involved in your financial affairs or your personal affairs. This should go without saying for Christian volunteers, but it is important. Any romantic connection with inmates is absolutely not permitted between inmates and volunteers or chaplains. And do not provide them with your personal contact information or your phone number, your mailing address, or your email. You need to protect yourself at all times while also avoiding any hint of fraternizing. Despite policy, chaplains and volunteers can still be dynamically present with the inmates in their personal struggles and in their grief, and we can be honest about our life journey, both before and after our faith in Christ. Generally, my rule as a chaplain is this: if I'm sharing something that doesn't help the inmate draw closer to God or build a respectful professional relationship with me, then this interaction should be considered unnecessary. It's not about you anyway. It's about them. Without practice, it can feel awkward to constrain our relationships in this manner. Part of our continued work in the prison is to uphold healthy boundaries, and if we find our boundaries are becoming infringed, then we have to correct our approach. This can be challenging when we're surrounded by so much relational need. If you discern that you need to reestablish healthy boundaries with an inmate, then you'll need to pull back or withdraw. But be careful how you do it, though. You don't want to seem harsh or judgmental, making them feel rejected yet again. Be gentle. Work to establish consistent ministerial boundaries. In the context of a jail or prison where men and women feel deeply abandoned and rejected, it's important not to add to this feeling by pushing them away or growing attached to them too much in an unhealthy manner and then needing to withdraw from them. If we're clear about our goals regarding relationships at the beginning, then we'll be able to navigate this area more easily. If you're uncertain about it, seek out some advice from the prison chaplain, if there is one, or simply ask one of the more experienced members of your team.